The paradox of the surprising execution. The paradox of the surprising execution, often referred to as the unexpected hanging paradox, is an intriguing logical conundrum that delves into the complexities of prediction and surprise. The puzzle is structured around a seemingly simple scenario involving a judge, a condemned individual, and the concept of an unforeseen event. The essence of the paradox lies in understanding how an event can be both foreseeable and unexpected at once, challenging our natural understanding of logic and anticipation. Picture a scenario where a judge informs a prisoner who is facing execution that he will be hanged at noon on a weekday during the upcoming week. However, there is one key condition. The hanging must come as a surprise to the prisoner. The judge further clarifies that the prisoner will not be able to predict the day of his execution in advance, meaning the prisoner won't know when the hanging is scheduled to occur until the very day of the event itself. At first glance, this situation seems quite straightforward, but as we explore its implications, it becomes increasingly puzzling. To start, the prisoner begins to contemplate when the hanging might happen and attempts to figure out which day it could be. The prisoner rules out Friday as a possibility, reasoning that if the hanging were set for Friday, it could no longer be a surprise. By Thursday evening, if the prisoner has not been executed, he would automatically know that Friday is the only remaining option, which would violate the condition of surprise. Following this line of thought, the prisoner also dismisses Thursday as a possibility. If he survives until Wednesday evening, then Thursday would be the only remaining day for the hanging. However, this would lead the prisoner to deduce, by Wednesday evening, that Thursday is the designated day, again violating the requirement of surprise. Extending this reasoning backward, the prisoner eliminates Wednesday, Tuesday, and ultimately Monday from consideration. If the prisoner has made it through the entire Monday, he would deduce that Tuesday is the inevitable day of the hanging, which once again breaks the rule of surprise. By this process of elimination, the prisoner concludes that the hanging cannot take place on any day of the week. However, this reasoning leads to a paradoxical situation. If the prisoner believes that the hanging is impossible, yet the judge proceeds with the execution, say on a Wednesday, the event would still occur as a surprise, even though the prisoner has convinced himself otherwise. The Raven Paradox and the nature of confirmation. The Raven Paradox presents a fascinating exploration of how we comprehend and assess evidence in relation to hypotheses. At its core, this paradox challenges our intuition about what constitutes valid supporting evidence for a particular hypothesis. It begins with a straightforward hypothesis. All ravens are black. This hypothesis can be tested by observing ravens. If a raven is spotted and it is black, this observation seems to support the hypothesis. However, the paradox deepens when we extend our consideration to observations involving non-ravens. According to traditional confirmation theory, evidence should either support or contradict a hypothesis. For example, when a black raven is observed, it appears to strengthen the hypothesis that all ravens are black. This aligns with our expectations. But Hempel's paradox introduces an unexpected twist. It proposes that not only does observing a black raven support the hypothesis, but so does observing a non-raven object that is black, like a black cat or a black car. This is because such an observation, being non-contradictory to the hypothesis, indirectly provides support for it. The paradox becomes even more perplexing when considering observations that are not black. For instance, observing a green apple, an object that is neither a raven nor black, would, according to the paradox, still lend support to the hypothesis that all ravens are black. This seems counterintuitive, as a green apple appears completely unrelated to the color of ravens. To understand why this happens, we need to explore the logic behind confirmation theory. The paradox is based on the premise that confirming a universal statement, such as all ravens are black, requires finding evidence that is consistent with the hypothesis. Since a green apple does not contradict the hypothesis, it is deemed to provide some level of support according to confirmation theory. This results in a surprising and counterintuitive outcome, challenging our typical understanding of how evidence functions. It forces us to reconsider the relevance of certain observations in confirming or refuting hypotheses. Additionally, it draws attention to the complexities inherent in logical reasoning and the interpretation of evidence. In the following section, we will explore the philosophical and logical consequences of Hempel's paradox and examine how it shapes our understanding of evidence, confirmation, and how such paradoxes are addressed. To fully understand Hempel's paradox, we need to explore its philosophical and logical dimensions. This paradox challenges traditional notions of evidence and prompts us to reconsider what it means to confirm a hypothesis. One of its key elements is the concept of confirmation through observation. According to classical confirmation theory, any observation that does not contradict a hypothesis can be considered evidence that confirms it. This principle leads to the surprising conclusion that observing non-black objects, such as green apples, can support the hypothesis that all ravens are black. The paradox brings to light the problem of relevance in confirmation theory. While observing a green apple may technically confirm the hypothesis, this observation seems unrelated to the actual question of whether all ravens are black. The disconnect between the observation and the hypothesis raises important questions about what counts as meaningful evidence. Let's consider some counterexamples to further illuminate the paradox. First, observing a black cat, an object that is not a raven but is black, supports the hypothesis that all ravens are black, according to confirmation theory. This makes sense, as the black cat aligns with the color aspect of the hypothesis. Second, observing a green apple also supports the hypothesis, even though the apple is neither a raven nor black. This connection seems less direct, which complicates our understanding of how evidence should function. Now consider the observation of a white raven. This would directly contradict the hypothesis that all ravens are black, offering clear evidence against it. This example demonstrates that evidence can, at times, definitively disconfirm a hypothesis. Hempel's paradox also introduces the idea of confirmation holism, the concept that hypotheses are tested in conjunction with other beliefs and theories. The paradox suggests that observations may not always support a hypothesis as directly as they appear to, prompting us to reflect on how we interpret evidence within the context of broader theories and beliefs. Furthermore, the paradox challenges our understanding of scientific hypotheses. Typically, hypotheses are tested through direct observations and experiments. However, Hempel's paradox reminds us that while formal logic may suggest any non-contradictory observation supports a hypothesis, real-world scientific inquiry often requires focusing on more relevant and directly related evidence. In the next section, we will discuss the broader implications of Hempel's paradox, particularly its influence on scientific reasoning and how it informs our understanding of evidence and confirmation. The paradox has significant consequences for how we approach scientific hypotheses, as it underscores the need for contextual relevance in evidence evaluation. While formal logic might imply that any observation that does not contradict a hypothesis provides confirmation, scientific reasoning demands that we prioritize relevant and contextually meaningful evidence. In research, hypotheses are typically tested through experiments that involve controlled observations closely tied to the hypothesis. Hempel's paradox highlights the importance of considering how evidence directly relates to the specific hypothesis being tested. It also points to the limitations of applying formal logic to real-world situations. While any non-contradictory observation could, in theory, provide support for a hypothesis, practical science often requires balancing logical consistency with empirical significance and relevance. The paradox also relates to confirmation bias, where individuals tend to seek out or emphasize evidence that supports their existing beliefs, while dismissing contradictory evidence. It highlights the importance of being mindful of how evidence is interpreted and ensuring that the evidence is substantial and relevant. The paradox also has important implications for theory building in scientific practice. It raises questions about how theories are tested and how evidence is integrated into theoretical frameworks. While formal logic can offer insights into confirmation, real-world theory building requires a nuanced understanding of how evidence should be applied to the hypothesis at hand. In summary, Hempel's paradox forces us to rethink our intuitive understanding of evidence and confirmation. It highlights the complexity of evaluating evidence and emphasizes the critical role of contextual relevance in scientific reasoning. By reflecting on the paradox, we gain a deeper appreciation of the complexities involved in evidence evaluation and the principles that guide scientific inquiry. Paradox of the ideal murder. The unexpected hanging paradox may indeed shock the prisoner, even though his rational reasoning suggests that it is an impossible outcome. The paradox arises from the contradiction between the prisoner's logical conclusion and the actual event that takes place. On one side, the prisoner believes that the hanging cannot happen due to the stipulation of surprise. Yet, if the hanging happens on a day he has previously ruled out, it will be a true surprise, revealing a flaw in his logic. This paradox delves into deeper philosophical questions about prediction, knowledge, and the relationship between them. It challenges our understanding of prediction and how something can be both predicted and still surprising. The prisoner's process of logically eliminating each day based on the surprise condition reflects a kind of flawless reasoning. However, this reasoning ultimately fails because it doesn't account for the possibility of an unexpected outcome. It illustrates how certain logical frameworks, when applied to specific circumstances, can yield seemingly contradictory results. The paradox encourages us to reconsider how surprise operates and what it means to predict something. In essence, the unexpected hanging paradox invites reflection on the limits of logical prediction and the nature of surprise. It exposes the tension between what can be logically deduced and what happens unpredictably, highlighting the complexity of understanding situations that are both anticipated and unexpected. To better explore this paradox, we need to examine how logical reasoning interacts with the nature of surprise. One critical aspect of this paradox is the concept of self-referential reasoning and how it affects our ability to predict. The paradox asks us to consider how self-referential loops in reasoning can lead to apparent contradictions. In attempting to predict the day of the hanging, the prisoner constructs a reasoning loop that eventually undermines the surprise he's trying to predict. This form of reasoning is central to the paradox, as it illustrates the inherent conflict between deductive reasoning and the unpredictability of certain outcomes. To gain further insight into this paradox, we can analyze it through the lens of epistemic logic, which studies knowledge and belief. In this area of logic, we often encounter scenarios where individuals' knowledge or beliefs can produce surprising or counterintuitive results. The prisoner's lack of knowledge regarding the timing of the hanging interacts with the concept of surprise, providing a clear example of how our understanding of an event can conflict with its actual occurrence. When the prisoner is told about the hanging but has no idea of the specific day, his attempt to deduce the day by process of elimination reflects predictive reasoning, where one anticipates an outcome based on conditions. Yet, paradoxical outcomes arise when conditions themselves involve uncertainty or surprise. The paradox also resonates with Gödel's incompleteness theorems, which state that in any sufficiently complex system, there are true statements that cannot be proven within that system. Similarly, the prisoner's system of prediction for the hanging day is incomplete. It fails to predict the event accurately. Game theory also provides an interesting framework for understanding this paradox. The prisoner's situation can be seen as a game with specific rules and constraints. The judge's announcement sets the stage for the prisoner to predict an event under the condition that the event must come as a surprise. The result, a surprising hanging, reveals how strategic interactions between knowledge and prediction can lead to unexpected outcomes. Examining the paradox through these various lenses reveals the complexity of surprise and prediction. It shows how logical reasoning, knowledge, and game theory interplay, offering a multifaceted perspective on the paradox and its implications for how we approach predictions and expectations. Ultimately, the unexpected hanging paradox compels us to reconsider the nature of knowledge and prediction, urging us to reflect on how we understand events that carry both elements of surprise and predictability. Furthermore, the paradox challenges us to question our predictive models and their limitations. In the real world, prediction models often change as new information becomes available, which can offer a more nuanced understanding of surprise. The paradox illustrates how static prediction models, which fail to adapt to unforeseen outcomes, are inadequate in certain scenarios. Dynamic models, which can incorporate real-time feedback and adjustments, offer a more robust way to handle predictions and surprise. The paradox also encourages reflection on the management of expectations, both personally and within organizations. Effective expectation management is critical for achieving desired outcomes and preparing for surprises. This paradox highlights how expectations, shaped by both logical deduction and emotional responses, influence how we react to unforeseen events. Philosophically, the paradox also invites reflection on time and causality. If an event is a surprise, it suggests that it defies our expectations of cause and effect. This raises questions about how we understand causality and whether it can be reconciled with the notion of surprise. In practice, the paradox has implications in decision theory and risk management. Understanding how surprises can arise despite careful planning is crucial for managing risks. The paradox teaches the importance of being prepared for the unexpected and recognizing the limitations of our predictive abilities. It invites us to consider how our perception of reality is shaped by prediction, surprise, and the unexpected. The unexpected hanging paradox offers profound insights into prediction, surprise, and expectation. It challenges us to rethink our assumptions and expand our understanding of how we interpret the world and react to unexpected events. By examining the paradox from multiple perspectives, we gain a deeper appreciation for the intricate relationship between logic, knowledge, and the outcomes we encounter. Paradox of the perfect crime. To fully understand the paradox of the perfect crime, we must first define what perfect means in this context. A perfect crime, in theory, is one where the perpetrator successfully carries out the act without leaving any evidence, without any witnesses, and without any chance of getting caught. This suggests an ideal scenario where every aspect of the crime is perfectly executed and controlled. In this idealized version of a perfect crime, there would be no physical evidence, such as fingerprints or DNA, to connect the perpetrator to the act. The crime would occur in such a way that no one would observe or hear anything that could implicate the criminal. This means avoiding any surveillance or electronic monitoring that could capture the act, ensuring that the perpetrator has no discernible motive or opportunity that would raise suspicion. Achieving perfection in crime requires meticulous planning and flawless execution. The criminal would have to anticipate every possible scenario that might lead to detection. Yet, even the most carefully laid plans can be disrupted by unforeseen factors or errors, introducing a level of uncertainty that challenges the idea of a truly perfect crime. The paradox of the perfect crime lies in the fact that the very concept of perfection in criminal acts assumes a level of control and precision that may be inherently unattainable. A crime without evidence, without a trace of involvement, may be extremely difficult to accomplish, if not impossible. Philosophically, the idea of a perfect crime raises questions about the nature of perfection. Is perfection something that can truly be attained, or is it simply an ideal that cannot be reached in practice? Additionally, the ethical considerations of committing a perfect crime bring up questions about morality. Even if a crime could be carried out flawlessly, Does that make it morally justifiable? The paradox of the perfect crime invites us to consider the complexities involved in committing an act of crime without leaving any trace. To explore this paradox further, we must examine real-world examples and theoretical discussions about the feasibility of achieving a perfect crime. Real-world examples demonstrate that, historically, many individuals have attempted to commit crimes with the intention of avoiding detection. However, in numerous cases, what initially appeared to be a perfect crime eventually unraveled due to unforeseen evidence or breakthroughs in investigation. Advances in forensic technology and investigative techniques, such as DNA analysis and digital forensics, have made it increasingly difficult to commit a crime without leaving evidence. Even seemingly insignificant traces can be crucial in solving a case. The paradox also brings attention to the limitations of a perfect crime, as it assumes total control over all aspects. In reality, unpredictable factors, such as human behavior or technical failures, often intervene, rendering the pursuit of a perfect crime elusive. The quest for perfection in criminal activity raises both ethical and legal issues about justice and morality, demonstrating the importance of investigation and forensic science in solving crimes. In conclusion, the paradox of the perfect crime serves as a thought-provoking exploration of crime, justice, and human nature. It challenges our understanding of criminal activity and perfection, revealing the complexity of committing a flawless act and providing insights into the moral and practical challenges associated with crime and punishment.